Hello and welcome to our first college football talk show here on NBC 2.0. It's something I've been excited about doing for a long time. We're going to talk about everything college football, talk about the playoff, talk about Heisman candidates, and we're going to talk about the biggest games going on this weekend and in past weekends. So we'll start with our recap of last weekend and a crazy weekend of football we had. We learned a lot about some different teams, learned some teams that are able to hang around with some teams maybe we didn't think they could hang around with. For instance, Notre Dame. A lot of people thought that they were going to go into Athens and get pounded by Georgia. That was not the case. For a little while, it looked like Notre Dame actually was controlling the game. They had the lead at halftime. Georgia was able to rebound late in the third quarter. They took a 10-point lead, and it was just too much for Notre Dame to overcome in the end. I believe that this kind of proved that Notre Dame is a better team than we thought they were. After the college football playoff, when they got pounded by Clemson, I think a lot of people thought that this game would be a lot of the same, thought that Georgia's defensive backs and Georgia's athletes would just be too much for Notre Dame. But that was not the case at all. It was actually a phenomenal game to watch. And I don't think this eliminates Notre Dame at all from the college football playoff. Based on this performance, it's less of a loss than most people are going to give Notre Dame credit for. We also learned that Michigan is not a very good football team at all. They went into Madison, Wisconsin, and they got manhandled from beginning to end. Shea Patterson was pretty bad once again. He's had turnover problems all year, and Jim Harbaugh's offense really just can't figure things out. They have to still play Michigan State, Ohio State, and Notre Dame. It's a brutal schedule. They will have to win all three games, most likely, to stay in contention for the Big Ten championship and stay in contention for the college football playoff. A lot of people, I don't think, would be shocked if they lost all three of those games. Defensively, they were not good. Offensively, they've always been not very good. But they played a good team. And let's talk about Wisconsin for a second. Wisconsin is proving that they are a legit title contender in the Big Ten. Jack Cohn has come in, and he's done a phenomenal job. He stepped into the quarterback position at Wisconsin, and he's done a really good job. He looks like a seasoned veteran back there. Handing the ball off to Jonathan Taylor is always a perk, and Jonathan Taylor has been definitely, in my opinion, the best running back so far this year. Had some big runs in the first half that really put the game out of reach for Michigan. We also learned that Jonathan Taylor is not the only thing on that offense that works. Wisconsin had a lot of success doing other things. When Jonathan Taylor went out of the game, it really never slowed down for the Badgers. They were able to still keep it out of reach. Those are the main points from the past weekend. I'll get into my top 6 teams in the country, and we'll start with number 6, the Oklahoma Sooners. Oklahoma's offense obviously is probably the best offense in college football. It's probably the best offense we've seen in the past decade. But their defense has just not been up to par in recent years. Last year they ranked dead last out of 130 teams in the FBS in pass defense, and that cost them in the playoff. They got down big to Alabama, and it was a bad look for Oklahoma. This year, they brought in some new players, got veteran leadership in Kenneth Murray. They brought in a new defensive coordinator, and they're much quicker on defense, and they seem to have improved a decent amount. They haven't played any great offenses yet, however. And this weekend, they'll play Texas Tech. Texas Tech is known for having some pretty good quarterbacks, and they've been known to give Oklahoma problems in the past. So we'll see how that goes. But Jalen Hurts is the real deal. He's got thrown to guys like CeeDee Lamb. They got great offensive line. Oklahoma's the real deal and a playoff contender, absolutely. And number 5, we have the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia has been a phenomenal football team the past couple years, led by Kirby Smart. They got one of the best running backs in the country in DeAndre Swift. They just beat Notre Dame at home 23-17, so they have a marquee win on their schedule. One of the problems I see with them, however, is their mental toughness. Last year against Alabama, they blew the game. They ended up losing it. It cost them their opportunity to be in the college football playoff, and all their players were taking to Twitter after Notre Dame was getting pounded by Clemson. They're like, four best teams. They really thought that they were a part of that upper echelon of teams, and then they went into the Sugar Bowl, and Texas absolutely manhandled them. It was not a very close game. The score did not tell the story at all. That can't happen with Georgia this year. If they lose one game, they're going to have to recover from that, and they got to still play teams. They're going to have to play Alabama most likely if they're going to make it to the college football playoff, because that will mean that they'll have to win the SEC. They'll have to play probably Alabama, LSU, or Auburn. Great football teams, top 10 caliber football teams, and Georgia's going to have to be tougher mentally going into those games to really capitalize on these opportunities. At number 4, I have the Ohio State Buckeyes. Justin Fields has been phenomenal. Their offense is absolutely clicking on all cylinders, coming off a 76-point performance against the Miami Ohio Redhawks. Obviously not in the upper tier of competition, but still impressive nonetheless. They still have to play Michigan. Obviously, Ohio State has had great success against Michigan recently. They have not lost to Michigan in many years. Ohio State has always seemed to have Jim Harbaugh's number, and it seems this year that that's going to be no change. So Ohio State most likely will waltz into the Big Ten championship game. I do worry about their kind of determination and their engagement in the middle of the season. It's been a couple years in a row now where they've had great starts, and then all of a sudden they'll put up a dud. Last year they lost by 29 to Purdue, who is not a good football team whatsoever. 2 years ago they lost by 30 to Iowa. It's just there's no room for that in the college football playoff, and so Ohio State's going to have to make sure that they're engaged through the entire season if they want to really make a run at a title. At number 3, I have the LSU Tigers. Joe Burrow has seemingly come out of nowhere. It's been pretty phenomenal what he's done. They've got one of the best offenses in the country right now, which is not LSU's MO. They got one of the best defensive backs in the country in Grant Delpit. Their defense has not been what we thought it would be. They gave up 38 points to Texas. They still won that game because their offense has been so great. I don't believe that game was as close as the score. I think that LSU pretty much dominated that game. I think LSU is a playoff caliber team, but they're not even the best team in their division. And you can make an argument that Georgia is a better team than them because of Georgia's experience. LSU has 0 playoff experience. Their coach has never been a head coach of a championship team, and it's gonna be tough for them to get into the playoff. I think they have probably the 3rd best chance, in my opinion, in the SEC. However, they could be the 2nd or 3rd best team in the SEC. At number 2, I have the Clemson Tigers. Trevor Lawrence has just not been what we expected him to be this year. 7 touchdowns to 5 interceptions is not the secure, non-erratic Trevor Lawrence that we've seen. They've got great running backs. Travis Etienne, he's been great in the past, but he's also, like Trevor Lawrence, only really had one phenomenal performance this year. They're going to need both of those guys to really clean that up and be at the top of their game if they're going to beat teams like LSU and Alabama and Georgia when it comes playoff time. And at number 1, I have the Alabama Crimson Tide. Tua Tagovailoa is a Heisman frontrunner in my opinion. There's not a better player in the country right now than him. He's got amazing wide receivers to throw to. He's got a Heisman candidate in Jerry Jeudy. Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, and Devontae Smith have been completely reliable over the past couple years. They will have to go through Auburn, and they'll have to go through Georgia and LSU. That could be tough. Those 3 games, those are all against top 10 opponents. It'll be difficult for them to get through those unscathed, but I don't think that they'll have as much difficulty as some people might think. Their defense, however, does worry me. They've lost a lot of depth at multiple positions, and they lost their best defensive player and their defensive leader, Dylan Moses, for the entire year. And against championship level teams, that can really take a toll. They haven't played any of those yet. And then their special teams has always been a disaster. I don't know Nick Saban, I guess, needs to focus more on recruiting special teams because that can always make or break a game. So those are my top 6 teams in the country. These are my dark horse contenders to make the playoff behind these teams. At number 1, I have Wisconsin. Number 2, I have Auburn. Number 3, Notre Dame. Number 4, Texas. Number 5, Penn State. And number 6, Oregon. Oregon is kind of an edge one for me. I'm not really sold on Justin Herbert. I'm not really sold on Mario Cristobal. They've got to beat some guys. They lost to Auburn in a game that I believe they should have won fairly easily. I think Auburn is a good football team, but Oregon had a good lead in that game against a freshman quarterback on a neutral site. They should have come away with that victory. Penn State's got good quarterback play from Sean Clifford so far. They've had a couple close calls, but their defense is legit. Texas, I think, is one of the most overrated teams in the country by the mass sports media. Sam Ehlinger, I don't think, is what everybody makes him out to be. He had a pretty good game against LSU, but he couldn't get it done. And they had 4 losses last year. They weren't a 2-loss, 3-loss fringe playoff team. They were a 4-loss football team last year. And Tom Herman has not proven that he can coach guys to a championship level. Notre Dame, I have at 3. I had Notre Dame at number 1 in my dark horse last week. I would say that if Notre Dame would have won that game, then I would have launched them into the top 6, kicking out Georgia, obviously. Notre Dame, I think, is a phenomenal football team. Brian Kelly is a very underrated coach, and Ian Book is a great quarterback. Losses. Like, they can't lose these games. They're not going to have a conference championship that they can go for. It's just going to be tough to justify them getting in the playoff at the end of the season, whether or not they win out. Number 2, Auburn. A good football team. Their quarterback so far has been a little unreliable, but Auburn always seems to perform when people think that they're not going to perform. Last year, we were excited about Auburn. Jarrett Stidham had some senior leadership coming off a win against Alabama going to the SEC championship, and they lost that game, obviously. But last year we were very excited about them, and then they disappointed. They ended up really destroying Purdue in their bowl game, but that was the bright spot of that season, really. And then, but this year it seems like they're overperforming. It's just a mystery. And then Wisconsin, they got the best running back in the country. They destroyed Michigan, and they play in a weak conference the rest of the way, or a weak division the rest of the way. They're going to have to beat Ohio State, most likely, twice if they're going to make the playoff and win the Big Ten. I don't really have many worries about Wisconsin other than that. Now we're going to get into our Heisman top 10. At number 1, I have Tua Tagovailoa. I think this is a complete no-brainer. He has been absolutely masterful the entire season. 0 interceptions, and 17 touchdowns. He's been phenomenal. Number 2, I have Jonathan Taylor. He's one of the most efficient running backs. The dude is fast. He's big. He's just a great running back for today's college football landscape, and he plays for one of the best teams in the country and one of the most underrated teams in the country. At number 3, I have Joe Burrow. He's putting up video game numbers. He put up video game numbers against Texas, who beat Georgia last year. He's performing, and that's really what LSU needs right now is good offense, because their defense has not been up to par with what LSU's defense has been in the past. So LSU fans should be relieved by that. Joe Burrow has been phenomenal. At number 4, I have Justin Fields. I'm putting Justin Fields ahead of the number 5 slot, Jalen Hurts, just because Justin Fields has played all 4 weeks and they just beat Miami of Ohio 76-5. So I'm giving Justin Fields the edge. However, I do think Jalen Hurts in the long run will end up being the better player. Jalen Hurts at number 5, he's been fantastic. Running the ball, passing the ball, it's all been there for him, and their offense is clicking on all cylinders. 6 through 10, I have Sam Ehlinger at 6, Travis Etienne at 7, Jerry Jeudy at 8, Chuba Hubbard at 9, and Jake Fromm at 10. I don't have Trevor Lawrence on this list. His numbers just, so far, you can't justify putting him on a top 10 Heisman list. Now we're going to go into our games of the week, and these are, in my opinion, the three most impactful games, or the three most exciting and fun to watch games that will be going on this weekend. At number one, I have Notre Dame and Virginia. Virginia, I think they're a solid football team, but they just, they had to come back from being down 17 to a team like Old Dominion. And I think that this is a complete mismatch. I think it's a coaching mismatch, it's a quarterback mismatch, it's an athlete's mismatch. I think Notre Dame wins this game fairly easily. By 2 touchdowns at least is what I'm predicting. 35-17 Notre Dame is what I expect for that game. And Notre Dame has to win this game, or they will be eliminated from playoff contention. 2 losses, no conference championship. Losing to 2 ranked teams in a row, it's just very hard to justify putting them in the playoff after that. And Virginia, it's a good opportunity for them to show that they can contend in the ACC and that they could give Clemson a little bit of a run. Do I think it'll happen? No. I think that Notre Dame will take care of their business fairly easily. Next up, we got USC and Washington, and this is an extremely important early Pac-12 season game. Washington really needs this win. If they lose, it would mean an 0-2 start and a loss to the 2 of the top 3 teams in the Pac-12 rankings-wise, USC and Cal. The loss to Cal was surprising. They've put up points in every single game except the game against Cal. It just shows Cal's defense is legit. USC with a third-string quarterback against Washington's notoriously quick and skilled defensive backs. Seems like a mismatch, even though Matt Fink was phenomenal when he came in against when he came in the last game. So he threw for 351 yards and 3 touchdowns. I'm going to still take Washington. I think that they got the quarterback advantage, and overall they should be able to take care of business at home. I have this game at 37-23 Washington. Oklahoma versus Texas Tech, and I put this game on a possible bloodbath alert. There's going to be a lot of points scored in this game, and I don't think most of them are going to be scored by Texas Tech. Oklahoma's offense has been miraculously good the past couple years since Lincoln Riley arrived on campus. Texas Tech's offense has notoriously been good. They don't have Cliff Kingsbury anymore. Their defense, Texas Tech, has rivaled Oklahoma's for the worst in the Big 12. This year, Oklahoma showed improvement. I think early in the season, Oklahoma still has gas. I think they will prevail by a large margin at home. 52-24, I have that game at. Now we're gonna get into my 2 my long-term predictions. We got the Power 5 conference predictions. So this is for each Power 5 team. I have who I believe at the end of the season will be in the title games and who will win. For the Big Ten, I have Wisconsin beating Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. Wisconsin has just been no weaknesses so far in their game. Young quarterbacks worry me. I like Jack Cohn, but Justin Fields is also a young quarterback. So, and I think just Wisconsin is going to end up being more prepared under Paul Chryst, who's a more experienced coach in these moments than Ryan Day. So I'm going to go with Wisconsin over Ohio State. Next, I got the Big 12. I got Oklahoma over Texas. I think Texas will lose to Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry, and I think their season will spiral out of control, honestly. This was the year that Texas was supposed to be back. That LSU game was supposed to be the springboard into possibly a playoff season. Texas is going to have to beat Oklahoma twice if they want to make the playoff. It's just not going to happen. I think Oklahoma's way too talented offensively. Their defense has shown great improvement. I think that Oklahoma is going to beat Texas out for the Big 12 title. In the ACC, I have Clemson over Virginia. This most likely at some point will change because I think Notre Dame is gonna pummel Virginia. I think it's gonna end up being Clemson and Pittsburgh possibly at some point, but right now I'm gonna go with Clemson and Virginia. Clemson's going to win the ACC. Like, there's really nothing to it. They're the best team by far. It's not even close. It's Clemson pretty much over anyone, and you'll be correct with that. In the Pac-12, I have Washington over USC. I think it's going to be this early game will show a lot about these two teams. I think USC will figure out a way to get to that title game. Clay Helton will still be on the hot seat at that point, I think, because I think that they will lose multiple games. Their division is so weak this year. Washington I think they're well coached. They've got an experienced quarterback in Jacob Eason, great defensive backs, notoriously good defense. I think that they will find a way to get to that Pac-12 championship game and ultimately prevail. I don't think the Pac-12 will be in the playoff, however. And then the SEC, I got Alabama over Georgia. Whoever wins the early season game or the midseason game between LSU and Alabama will win the SEC West. And Georgia, I think, will win the SEC East. Playing Florida, or beating out Florida with their second string quarterback. Felipe Franks, in my opinion, was nothing extremely special in the first place. But Kyle Trask, I think, is less of something special than Felipe Franks was. So I still think Georgia's gonna find a way to get through the SEC East unscathed, and it's gonna be a showdown in that SEC championship game, no matter what. And then finally, we got my final college football playoff predictions for this week. Number 6, I have the Georgia Bulldogs. I'm putting them there because I have Alabama in the playoff over them because they're going to win the SEC. I have at 5 Ohio State. I have Ohio State there because I put Wisconsin at number 4. And the reason I think that final game in the Big Ten is going to end up being a play-in game no matter what. And I think that they're going to put Wisconsin in at 4, and then you can't really justify putting Ohio State ahead of Wisconsin. So I have Ohio State at 5. Number 3, I have Oklahoma. I think the one game that scares me with Oklahoma is the Texas game, but I honestly think that Oklahoma will make it to the playoff this year undefeated. I don't think that they have any blemishes on their record. Jalen Hurts is the real deal. And these guys mean business this year. At number 2, I have Alabama. Alabama will have a harder time beating teams this year than Clemson will because Clemson's going to play nobody, and Clemson right now ahead in the AP polls. I think that'll hold just because Clemson's going to blow people out. I mean, Trevor Lawrence could throw 0 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, and Clemson's still going to find a way to beat teams like Syracuse by 40. And then, so Alabama at 2 and then Clemson at 1 for reasons mentioned before. This is going to conclude the first rendition of this talk show. Hopefully we'll be back next week and